If you clicked on this video, it probably means that you're interested or think it would be a dream come true to live in an RV. And it totally can be. Once we decided on moving forward with an Airstream travel trailer, first we were crazy level excited because it meant we were gonna get to be traveling again, just exploring our own backyard here in the US. But on the flip side of that, we had so much anxiety. And most of that was focused around having no idea what the heck we had gotten ourselves into. Before we actually moved into our Airstream, we had never stayed the night in an RV ever. So committing to living in one was a really big jump. So the anxiety was real. While we were feeling all of that anxiety, we spent a lot of time looking at blogs, at YouTube videos. Nothing really quelled it, so that's why we're making this video. These are the top 10 things that we wish that somebody would have told us before we committed to living full-time RV life in our Airstream. We hope they help you too.
This is probably my favorite tip to new RVers. I was absolutely terrified about towing something this big. Before this instance, the largest thing I'd ever towed was a bass boat, and it was very, very small, weighed very little, and it was nothing compared to 8,000 to 10,000 pounds, 30-foot long RV here. Of course, you need to be conscientious of staying in the lanes and taking turns a little bit wider than you normally would. But all in all, it's just not that bad. Here's one of my other favorite tips about driving the RV, and this I learned while on the road from another RVer. The backup camera, while amazing for backing up, is equally amazing when you're driving down the road. You're losing your rearview mirror, right? So there's actually a way to activate it while you're driving down the road so you can see what's behind your RV while you're driving, and that is extremely helpful. I didn't think about that until somebody brought it up, but backup cameras are not just for backing up. They can be your rearview mirror while you're driving down the road, which is super cool. So that's what I would tell every new camper. Don't be afraid of towing large RVs.
Daniel was so nervous about towing our Airstream that he had my anxiety at like a 10 before we left. So one of the things I did is I did a little bit of research about how I could be the best navigation partner. And if you and your partner are thinking about living in an RV, one of you needs to get to know the navigation. We use both Google Maps, and then we also have an RV app called RV Life. I toggle between the two. I feel like the RV app doesn't have quite as updated maps as Google Maps, so that's why I kind of look back and forth between the two on a regular basis. But I'm always watching out to ensure that we do not end up on a dead-end road, which is like the #1 thing Daniel talked about being terrified of. But it really isn't that bad. After about a week of towing the RV, we felt pretty chill about it. Don't be scared. You've got this. The second thing that we wish we had known before we moved into our RV full-time is that backing up, while though maybe always a little bit scary, gets better with time, and other campers will help.
It is probably, besides emptying the poop tank, the most intimidating thing that I can possibly think of with this RV life. It's backing this thing up. And the larger and longer your RV is, to me at least, the more intimidating it is.
We're gonna do a full video on our tips and tricks that we've learned about backing up, but I would say there are a couple that we use all the time that are critical. The first one is that we have walkie-talkies. Cell phone service is not always guaranteed everywhere you are, so you can use your cell phones, but we find it's just easier to use the walkie-talkies. Second thing is that we never say go right or go left when we're backing up. We instead say move towards the passenger side or move towards the driver's side, and that helps eliminate some confusion that's really easy if you start talking about rights and lefts. And then last one, my grandfather actually told us, when you're backing up your RV, instead of doing it on the top of the steering wheel, if you put your hands on the bottom of the steering wheel, your right and left actually return to normal.
And when I'm backing up and Lauren says passenger side and I'm grabbing the wheel from down below, I know automatically to go up on the passenger side. If she says driver's side, Conversely, I just go up on the driver's side, and that's how we back in successfully. And one last thing, you're just going to suck at it when you first start, and that's okay. If you want to feel better about yourself, just pull up a chair, grab a case of beer, and just sit there and watch everybody else back up their trailer, because they're gonna do the exact same crap, no matter how long they've been doing it. You're gonna have some that are better than others, but overall, everybody is constantly learning as we go.
So just don't feel bad about it. You'll be fine. The third thing that we wish we had known before we moved into our Airstream is that we didn't really need a long-term travel plan. When we first started looking at our 50-state adventure, we found a map that was a super efficient way to get throughout the United States. But this is 2020. So between unexpected cold fronts, wildfires, and a whole host of other things, we ended up having to throw that plan out the window pretty quickly. What I was worried about with that was, would we be able to find campgrounds? And when it was earlier in the season, it was definitely more difficult. What I found was the easiest way to do it was to go to Google Maps, type in RV parks, and search that way. Specifically because we were looking for local parks. There are other ways, like if you use a more mainstream campground system, you can go to their website and just look for the area. But Google Maps worked great for me to be able to find them. It is important to note that when you're booking campgrounds, like 75% of the time, you have to actually pick up the phone and call, which I was shocked about. I figured in 2020 you would be able to go online and book anything. Not true. And also, if you get stuck in a place where you've got like one night here or one night there that is not available, you can always look for a close by boondocking spot or go with a harvest host for a night, stay at a winery, a brewery, a farm. And both of those options are free and can cover you when it seems like there's an overabundance of campers. The last thing I would note about this particular item is that one of the things we learned quickly as far as booking our plans is that there are 2 busy days at almost all campgrounds. Fridays, when everybody comes in, and Sundays, when pretty much everybody leaves. So avoiding those 2 days is a really helpful piece of finding and booking campgrounds if you're going to do it a little bit more on the fly.
Don't attempt to boondock too early. Now, while it looks amazing on something like Instagram, where you imagine these like Airstreams on these cliffs and you have these beautiful backdrops, right? That is super awesome, but it requires a little bit of skill set. And if I haven't explained boondocking, what I essentially mean is that you're just basically camping without any hookups. You're not gonna have sewage, water, or power. And it's important to know those things. It's best to start with maybe 1 or 2 nights in a boondocking location, but if you're just thinking about like diving into boondocking on day 1, you've got a lot of stuff to learn before you tackle something like that. You're gonna need to know your rig inside and out before you go off grid. It's a very important thing to know.
Hey, is your internet working?
It's working great. How about yours?
I'm down again.
Again?
Again. That leads us to the 5th thing that we wish we would have known. We knew it wasn't going to be the simplest thing to deal with internet while living in an RV, but it was way more difficult than we expected. First, 95% of the time, the campground Wi-Fis suck, so you cannot count on that. Second, you really have to have a minimum of 2 carriers, or else you can't bounce back and forth when one of them doesn't have good service and the other one does.
You're gonna find campgrounds where AT&T towers reign supreme, and you're gonna find campgrounds where Verizon towers reign supreme. But you just never really know which one it's going to be until you get there.
So having 2 carriers are critical. But even on top of that, data throttling is so real, and there is nothing more frustrating than hitting a data wall. We're still in the process of figuring out how we're going to avoid that moving forward, since internet is super critical to what we do for work. But we've got a fancy new router that's coming in. We've got an antenna that we're going to be putting on top of our new Airstream. So we're working on solutions. They're out there. It's a little bit different for everybody. For us, we've got huge videos that we upload, so that's the most complicated and frustrating thing. But what I have figured out that's pretty amazing, we rented some co-working spaces. Obviously, a lot of co-working spaces will have fiber, but it will cost you. Typically, what we've seen is kind of anywhere between $30 for a desk for the day into $100 for like a private office. So that is something that there's an investment associated with, whereas my new favorite hack that seems to work just as well is to go to a hotel. I will go, if I've got video that needs to be uploaded, I'll go to the Marriott, say hello to the lady at the front desk, pick a seat, and sit there and upload video and get a little bit of work done. And of course, that's completely free. So that's my favorite hack for getting things up, because I have been to 100 local coffee shops and none of them have ever had Wi-Fi strong enough to do any type of serious uploading.
I mean, it can be tricky. Let's just say, for instance, you have a scheduled video call with maybe a client, right? And you're at a coffee shop. They can also be very noisy too. So you're gonna hear a lot of like clanking in the kitchen and things like that. It's just not ideal.
So those are the hacks that we've figured out with the internet thus far. Probably another one that once we really get it figured out and can actually upload video from the Airstream, that we'll do a whole video on, because it has caused us so much heartache due to the internet being a pain in the butt with RV life.
Now we're gonna talk about what has sort of become my favorite topic, because for me, it was the one thing I dreaded more than absolutely anything with the RV. It is draining the poop tank. And the expectation in my mind was that this was going to be an absolute shiznit show, when in fact, it wasn't that big of a deal when I ultimately did it. Now, the reasoning why I had to do it the very first time, well, it's a very funny story, so if you haven't seen my poop tank video, you should probably check it out. One of my favorite things that I've learned is that down below, you've got a couple of tanks here. You've got your black tank, which is basically your poop tank or waste tank, and then you've got your gray tank or wastewater tank, which I now call Lauren's tank. And the important thing to remember is that you always drain your black tank first, and then you're going to use the gray tank or Lauren's tank to wash the tube out afterwards. I've purchased a few tools that have made this a lot easier of a process. The drain here is not always as beautifully placed as this one. There are times when this drain is 10 or 15 feet away, and these hoses are most commonly 10 feet in length. So what I purchased these Rhino interlocking hoses. So I've got two 10-foot interlocking hoses. Let's just say, for instance, there's a sewer that's 10 or 20 feet away. I can just connect these two together. I've got an extension, they interlock, and then I can run it across the entire length from the RV to the sewer. One of my other favorite tools is what I like to call my poo-poo train. This poo-poo train is my absolute favorite. This is also made by Rhino. This is one of the tracks, but it comes with a set of tracks. Because I'm OCD, it looks like a perfect slope, like a ski slope. If you just happen to have seen my poo-poo train in person, I know you're impressed because it's pretty awesome. One last tip. Now that you've admired my beautiful poo-poo train, this clear joint right here is extremely helpful because you're not really able to see what's flowing through here unless you have this clear joint. A lot of places offer just like a solid joint, but it is extremely helpful to be able to see what's happening there. It was most beneficial having a clear joint when we were having some plumbing issues. It turns out that super ultra mega tissue is not what you want for an RV. Within literally the first week or two, we clogged our poo-poo train line here, and we had to figure out how to unclog it, and that was not great. Ultimately, we learned that you don't go with the mega ultra tissue. You go with the stuff that's like, I'm not saying single ply, but check the packaging to make sure it says septic safe. So if you're unsure about which toilet paper to use, we've learned this trick from another camper as well. Take some toilet paper, some test toilet paper, put it in a plastic bag with some water, and then let it sit overnight. Now, if it doesn't break down overnight, don't think it's gonna break down your RV miraculously. So don't use that toilet paper. But if it does break down, you know you're in the safe zone and you can use that RV toilet paper.
Laundry is one of the things that is my chore every week. Which brings us to tip number 7. The thing that I wish that someone would have told me is that laundry is so simple at campgrounds. I spent time researching, looking at RV washer and dryers. They can be really cheap, they can be expensive, listen to tons of YouTube videos about them. But the reality is that doing laundry at the campgrounds is so simple, I haven't even thought a thing about it since. Step 1, bring your own laundry detergent. Easy enough. Then all you need is quarters. And most campgrounds at the front office have them. So if you've got cash, no big, they can help you. That's where I found is the easiest place to find quarters right now since we're going through a coin shortage or whatever. Easy as that. It'll wash for about 30 minutes on average, and then I'll just come back, throw it in the dryer, and call it a day. Easy enough. The 8th thing that we wish we would have known wasn't actually something that caused us anxiety before we moved into the Airstream, but as soon as we got in here and got a permanent bump on the back of our heads from hitting it on things, it became a top priority. It simply takes time to get used to living in a tiny space. We had stayed in small apartments all over Europe and thought that that would be something that would be super easy for us, but it really does take some time to get used to.
If you're new to RVing and you're new to small spaces and we catch you wearing a helmet the first few weeks while walking around your RV,
we're not gonna judge you.
No judgment whatsoever, because you're probably gonna bump your head a couple of times. You're probably gonna kick your shin on a couple of things until you get used to the space.
I feel like you've been notorious for hitting your head doing the dishes on the cabinets above the...
The cabinets, yeah. I think because I struggle with, do I keep my head beneath the cabinet while I'm washing dishes? Or do I just kind of look at it eye level? And I'm usually undecided, and if I'm underneath and I just kind of want to transition to looking at it eye level, I usually just go boom and hit my head.
We started calling them perma bumps.
On the flip side of that, there's so much storage space here that it is absolutely amazing. So that is really the plus side of things.
But it definitely takes some time, getting used to wiggling past your partner, as one person's cooking on the stove and the other one's going to a different end of the RV. It just takes some time. Don't get frustrated by it. The best thing you can do is laugh at yourselves and you'll figure it out. It gets a little bit normal about after 30 days in. Yeah,
and now that we're even 2 months in, it's kind of funny because now it almost seems like too much space. We've learned to very easily navigate the space. And yeah, even now I think we could, if we had to, not that we'd want to, but we could, live in a smaller Airstream.
The biggest reason for full-time RV life that we chose the 30-foot Classic, it's actually the smallest of the Classic versions, but the automation and the home technology in it are so helpful from an efficiency standpoint. Since we work on the road full-time, it makes everything so much faster, and for that reason alone, we wouldn't go any smaller because the Classic line is the only one that has those features. But if it was just about space, we could probably live in one at least 5 or 6 feet shorter.
Maybe. But to her point, the Classic, I believe it comes in a 30-foot and a 33-foot. Mm-hmm. We did not opt for the 33-foot because we had heard that at most national parks you're capped at 30 feet. So we knew that 30 feet was our sort of max size that we wanted to go with. The smart controller on this thing is just awesome. I mean, it's that same thing you get from a Nest where you're laying in bed and it's either too hot or too cold and you don't want to get out of bed. So you just operate it from your phone, and that feature alone is probably worth the smart control because we've used it like 1,000,000 times.
And then we also have the computer that shows us the percentage of how we're doing on our tanks, our gray tank, our black tank. It shows us what the percentage is left in our propane tanks. So it just makes a lot of things so easy that we wouldn't go smaller because we want the classic, but from a small space perspective, we probably could do with a little bit less space and still live very comfortably. Okay, on to tip number 9.
The 9th thing we wish we would have known when we started this entire journey is that even though we don't own a home, we do use a physical address. Now, this is a very good tip. If you have a family member that can send you care packages at some point along your journey, that would be a great family member whose address you could potentially use, and that's exactly what we've done. This is especially important if you have local goods from your area that you just absolutely love. You can have them delivered to your family member or friend, and then they can target you at some point on the road with packages. Most campgrounds allow you to receive packages. You just have to give them a heads up. We've done this on several occasions where we've been at a campground for an extended period, and we've said, hey, we've got a package arriving in 3 days, just a heads up. So you can call a campground you're about to go to and let them know, and they'll hold your package. Ideally, if you can list the lot number on the package when they're sending care packages to you, that's also helpful as well. One of the really cool things about the campground we're at this week is that they have mailboxes here. You've got an outgoing slot, but if they don't have that, you can usually drop off your mail at the offices. And again, really, this is a wonderful tip, especially if you have things you need to receive while you're on the road.
So the 10th thing that we wish we would have known, and is very, very critical if you're the kind of person who likes to take 2 or more showers a day, is that you will not be as clean as you are when you're living in a real home. Now, there are a few reasons for this. First, you are living in a campground, so there's dirt, muck, leaves, and all of the things everywhere. You will track it in. You're going to have to vacuum at least a couple of times a week for it not to be disgusting. You're just simply not as clean. Now, if living in a campground wasn't enough, showers are a thing, and they are not the same as when you live in a home. Now, you could go and use the showers at the campsites, and I'm assuming that would be a little bit more likely, but they're public showers. We've avoided that because it's 2020 and I don't have to explain that, and used our shower for the last 2 months. Now, it is totally functional, but there are a couple things that make it different than your shower at home. First, the hot water will never get as hot as it does at home. We've got pretty darn good water pressure, but the heat, especially if it's 30 degrees outside, is never going to get to scalding level hot. Second, if you're boondocking or not connected to hookups and don't have your gray tank open, you can fill the gray tank with a shower very, very quickly if you take it like you would at home. So, we actually learned from our friends over at Lub Subbin's channel, there are 2 different types of showers when you live in an RV. A Hollywood shower and a Navy shower. And you're gonna have to get darn good at that Navy shower, especially if you want to boondock. So even I, who am definitely a little more preferential to the Hollywood shower, have learned to turn the shower water on and off while I'm washing my hair, washing my body, because A, the space is tight, so if you leave the water on the entire time, you're gonna wash all the suds away immediately, and B, if you ever want to boondock, you can't use as much water as you normally do in a shower in an RV. So, long story short, we're not as clean as we were when we were living at home, but it's totally worth it.
Well, there you have it. Our top 10 things we wish we'd have known before we embarked on this RV life.
And if you have something that is not on this list of things you wish you would have known before you started RV life, make sure to put them in the comments below. We would love to learn from you guys versus learning the School of Hard Knocks, because we've already done that a little bit and it's not particularly fun.
That is so true. And one of the things you're gonna learn very quickly is that this community of RVers is just one of the most wonderful communities that we've ever been a part of. We've learned just as much from campers that were parked next to us and in the campgrounds as we have from fellow campers online who share tips through private messages and comments, and that really is what this is all about. I mean, you're becoming part of this amazing community of people that want to help each other, and you're all on this journey together, and I think that's probably one of my favorite things.
Totally. Campers are awesome. Hope you enjoyed these tips. If you did, make sure to subscribe to our channel, and we will catch you next time.